Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Not missing an hour's sleep? Some of you nodding. Well done for making it at all. I think. When we, in about 25 minutes' time, there'll be floods of people arriving. So well done for being the forerunners. As we said, we've been in a series entitled Growing on the Front Line, which is giving some input to how we grow as Christians and where we grow and what it means for people like you and I to stretch our faith and to become more like Jesus. We've looked at these topics over the last few weeks, and there's one more to go. I think we're going to pop it on the screen. There we go. Look at that. That's where we are, and this is where we are today, thinking about growth to action. And just in case you're wondering, where is this front line that we're talking about? Where is it, the place that I am called to grow in my Christian life? Here's a little video clip to remind us. It's entitled Growing on the Front Line because for most of us, we spend most of our lives outside of this environment of church. It's great that you come here and the various services and congregations that we have, but most of us will spend most of our times not here, out and about with people, our loved ones, our families, in our homes, our workplaces, in the places where we spend leisure, in teams that we play sport alongside. That's where we are called to be, and that's where we're called to grow. Jesus had this little phrase. He said this: I appointed you, speaking to his friends, to go and to bear fruit that will last. We are called to be those who grow fruit in our lives, benefit others, and as a result of that, grow in our own faith. Over the last few weeks, we've been following a little pattern. You may have spotted it. If you're in life groups, you may have focused in on this. But we've been thinking about reflecting, receiving God's word, renewing our faith, and then responding in the way that God calls us to. And today, we're thinking particularly about this responding moment. Again, David, if you could pop that on the screen, it'd be great. Keep going. One more. There we go. Thinking about what does it mean to respond to what God calls us to. And in order to do that today, we're going to take a little look at a verse from the passage that Sarah just read to us in James chapter 3, verse 13. And we're only going to look at this one verse today. Who is wise and understanding among you? We could do a Rob Wicks stand-up moment, couldn't we, in a sense? Who feels wise and understanding this morning? And then we all stand up, apportion to how wise we feel. I think I might have to go and sit down at that point. Who's wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good deed, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. We're just going to look at this one verse today, and we're going to work our way back through it, starting at the end of the verse and working back towards the beginning of it. Here's something that I came across this week. This is an advert for a vicar. I'm not looking for a job, by the way, but an advert written by an 8-year-old in a church that was looking for a vicar. And it said this about them: they must like food, like sport. They must like children. They must hate olives and celery. They must be modern and funky. That counts me out. They must be kind, loving, and cool. Again, no tick there. Organize themselves and other people. They can be a man or a woman. That's good, isn't it? They must have experience with children. I love this bit, no boring services. I'd love to know what's underneath the bits that are crossed out in this. This is what filled my week. This is what is behind the crossings out. No boring service. They must be funny. Have a pet and prefer dogs. Hey, well, there was one hooray. That's good. Although there's something crossed out there. I think it might say hate cats. And then they cross that bit out, figuring that's probably not a very Christian response. And then at the end, high five the kids when they leave. I like that. Although at the 9 o'clock service, I was fist pumping the 75-year-olds as they leave. And that always fills me with some sense of amusement in doing so. Although now they've started doing it back to me. So I went to shake hands with somebody this morning, like, no. Fist bump. 75 years old. Brilliant. Not me, them. So here's this, maybe this is a better advert for the role of leadership. It says this, James 3, verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? It's a question that James throws out. James, who was the brother of Jesus, who spent much of his time following Jesus around, slightly unsure probably about who Jesus was, and then the moment of commitment for James. And then James, as we go into the early New Testament times, James ends up leading a church in Jerusalem, the center point. He ends up being the person who's the focal point. They must have thought, you're the brother of Jesus. You must know what you're doing. He must have gone, I've got no idea, but I'm happy to give it a shot. Here he is leading this church. And James, in this letter, he's writing it to a bunch of congregations and churches that have sprung up all over the place. Here he is writing to them and saying, this is what it means to be a Christian. Don't forget these things when you do church, when you be church, when you serve your communities. He's saying, please focus in on these things. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it, he wrote, by good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom. And as I said, we're going to take a little look at this one verse, working backwards through it. Because when James writes, of course, when he was writing the book of James, it wasn't written as a book. It was just one long letter. There was no chapter headings or, numbers in it. It was just basically written as one long, here's what you need to do to be encouraged in your Christian life. And so he gets to this point and he says, here is a key moment for you. And he says this, that the focus for connecting with wisdom is in and through a relationship with Jesus. We're going to highlight that last word, wisdom. You see, when we think about wisdom, we often think about Bible colleges or education or things that we might learn, things that we might have read, books that we might be studying, focusing in on that whole intellectualization of the Christian life. And of course, those things can be good and helpful. I'm reading a book at the moment about the future of the church. It's really helpful. Like nationally and internationally, what does it mean to be church? It's helpful. But when James wrote this letter, he wasn't thinking primarily about the intellectualization of the Christian faith, what you can study and take in through reading and understanding. He starts with this whole thing. Wisdom comes from friendship with Jesus. It starts with that connection. It's wisdom that says, I recognize who I am. I recognize the needs that I have. And I recognize who Jesus is and all that he has done for me and wants to do in me and wants to do through me. That's the beginning of wisdom. In fact, the Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, not a book that you read or the ability that you have to pass exams, which is kind of good news, isn't it? It's about knowing Jesus. That's the beginning of wisdom. It starts there. That means that anybody can be wise. Anybody can live life in this way by first connecting with Jesus. And if you are trying to do the Christian life without first connecting with Jesus, it will wear you out. It will wear you out. Because as we get connected to him, as we welcome Jesus into our lives, it's him that gives us the strength to serve. It's him that gives us the strength to follow. It's him who picks us up when we fail, which we will do often. It's him that holds us when we go through difficult times, which we all do. Wisdom comes initially from friendship and connection with Jesus. Wisdom about meeting him. But then it says in this verse, if we work back through it, it talks about humility. That there's that wisdom of meeting with him. And then there's the humility that comes with that. I think for many years, I thought I was God's gift to the church. I don't mean this church, I mean generally. Initially, when I was ordained, I thought, everybody else is doing it wrong. Here we go. 25 years old when I was ordained. It didn't take me that long to realize what a ridiculous position that was. Not only because people are operating in very different ways, because ultimately it's all about following Jesus. What is he doing? And I've always said in church leadership, one of the great things that I've learned, I think, over the years is spotting what is God at work doing already that you might bless and follow him into. Not what are we engineering because of hard work and effort and personality. What is God doing already that we might follow him into? And I wonder whether you might ask that question of yourself in your workplace, for example. Because Jesus is there already. In the clients that you have, the people that you work, even if you spend your time working from home or, Jesus is there already. As you face people in the hospital or in your office or in your school, he's there already. Maybe the question is, Jesus, what are you doing here that I might follow you into it? Which conversation are you setting up for me to step into? Which person might I pray for in my own prayer times? He's there already. How might you follow him into it? And in some ways, I think that reflects this verse, something of a pattern of humility that says, do you know what? This isn't about me or about just the gifts that I have. It's about you, Jesus. I want to follow you. I don't want to think less of myself, but I do want to think about myself less and think about others more. So this week, who's God going to bring across your path that was part of his purpose? Who are you going to tackle in a rugby game that you might bless afterwards? I was always struck by a guy called Andrew Blowers, who was the number 8 for Bristol and New Zealand. He came to do a Saturday breakfast for us. He was rugby international. And I asked him the question, when you tackle somebody in a rugby game and you absolutely batter them and you flatten them out, doesn't that kind of stand slightly in conflict to your Christian faith? He said, no, not at all, because it's much better to give than to receive. I thought, wise words from an ex-rugby player myself. I thought, well, I wish I'd thought of that many years ago. Deeds done in humility, wisdom of connecting with Jesus, an attitude that says, Jesus, I'm nothing without you. I need you. You've given me gifts and all of that, but I need to know how I might serve in humility, to consider others more important than myself, to not think less of myself, but to think about myself less. How can I serve looking outwards with humility? And then as James is writing, he has this little dynamic. We're kind of ending up at the end, but as we follow back, he talks about deeds done. The actions that are done in humility. Most of us will spend most of our time with others. What does it look like for us to find deeds to do The Bible describes it like this, says that actually for every Christian there are works prepared in advance for us to do. And we can get ourselves caught up with, is this the thing that you prepared for me, Lord? And then we never move. I always think that guidance is much better when you move. When you start to move towards something or move towards someone, you discover God's heart and his purpose in that. Guidance is very difficult, just sat on a chair by yourself in a room. Then where do I go, Lord? Do I go left or do I go right? You're like, I don't know. Is that me? Is that my thoughts? What do I do next? Guidance is always easier when you start to move, I think. And as you start to move, gently, Jesus will take us and say, these things I have prepared in advance for you to do out of who you are. But we have to start to move, I think, towards something. Find something that you can just move towards, a person that you can move towards, a conversation that might be needed that you can move towards, something that you might serve in your workplace that you could move towards. Maybe serving coffee to people on your floor plate. Maybe taking a wander around and asking people, are you doing okay? Anything I can do? Those little conversations make all the difference. Deeds done. The Christian life is to be lived out in practical ways. I got stuck in when in a project called The Noise, which operates all around the place now, but it was done in London for a while, and the project operates in Bristol. Actually, it's coming up fairly soon. How many people have been involved in The Noise? Yeah, there's a few of us. The tagline is actions speak louder than words. And it's basically people getting stuck in their communities. Like, what can we do? How can we help? And it makes all the difference. Because it means the Christian life is visible, with Christians not forcing an agenda, but simply serving in the way that they can. And out of that service, incredible things happen. I think I may have said this before, but working in some of the tower blocks in London, we had a week or so of just serving with friends who lived there and helping people in those communities. And in these tower blocks, it was amazing on about day 3 when a barbecue was held by some of the folks who lived in these tower blocks, who were Christians, who just laid on a barbecue for their friends, and people came down from the 40th floor and met people they'd never met and connected with people they'd never connected with. And they had a barbecue just in the middle of these tower blocks. People started to engage with each other. Christians started to just help and talk and serve, and incredible things happened. Out of the Christian heart came that sense of community building. And I think we've all got slightly disconnected from each other, haven't we? Maybe COVID definitely hasn't helped us with this, because we all went to our homes for 2 years and, just sort of waited. And God, I think, is calling us as a church to reconnect in communities. In your street, what might you do to enable people to reconnect? Over the coronation weekend in May, what might you do to help people reconnect with each other? There are opportunities coming up. How do we get stuck in with deeds that might be done? Things that we might do. And even today, we've seen it, haven't we, on church news. As you take a step of 20 meters or so to your left, as you go out through the doors, there will be 302 cakes there, some of which are vegan, and some of which are normal. I'm going to be so much trouble later on, but you can head out and you can do something today. Deeds done. You can buy a cake or 10 and eat them when nobody's watching this afternoon. You can do something today that will make a difference. A deed done, a simple act that will enable something to happen as a result. The Kintsugi groups that we run here, the national initiative, as Julie shared earlier on, we can play our part today. A very simple act. You can support Jess and Abby as they are about to do a marathon, the London Marathon. They said to me today they're going to try and do it in under 4 hours. That's a joke. Sorry, they're going to try and do it in under 4 days. By running, walking, dancing across London. Have you got sponsorship that you're doing for that? People can. There's a QR code you can scan in. You can sponsor them to sprint around London, 26 miles, or you can pray for them whilst they do it. Or probably actually a team of people to pray for you afterwards. I think might be more helpful. Deeds done make a difference. Live the Christian life out of relationship with Jesus in humility, finding what it is that God is calling you to do. And if you're not quite sure, just do something. And then finally, it says this, let them show it by their good life. It's a throwaway line that James lobs in here, but there's something here about the Christian life being demonstrated. It wasn't theory, was it, that God stood at a distance and said, I love you from 100,000 miles away. I love you. See if you can figure it out from this distance. No. It was while we were still at a distance ourselves that Jesus came, God in flesh, and demonstrated what it means to be human, who demonstrated what it means to rescue and to save, who showed his hands and his feet to his friends and said, I'm alive. He showed it. The Christian faith is demonstrated to us. We see it in the face of Jesus, and he calls us to demonstrate it outwards. We're called into that. The times when you might gently pray for someone, maybe in the moment, to pray for someone in church, or maybe even in your workplace, or a colleague that you might be in a group with on WhatsApp, and you say, I'll be praying for you. Demonstrate what you believe. Show it by the way that you live and act. It's what God calls us to. If the Christian faith isn't demonstrated, it's nothing at all. We're called to show it by the way that we live. And somebody said to me, well, if all these things that we do, isn't that the way that we keep God happy if we just do more stuff? I loved what was said in this little phrase. It said this, we are saved by faith alone. So true. But the faith that saves us is never alone. We are saved by faith alone, but the faith that saves us is never alone. Sounds very modern, doesn't it? It was John Calvin in 1547. And I think that doesn't mean 10 to 4. That means a long time ago. So true. We're not saved by faith. We're not saved by actions. We are saved by faith in Jesus. But the faith in Jesus that saves us calls us to be stepping out in humility with good deeds to be done, with a life that's demonstrated what the Christian journey looks like. It is the calling of all of us to be those kinds of people. Whether you're young or older, whether you've been a Christian for many, many years, or whether this is all new to you, meet with Jesus, connect with him, discover who you are in him, and then discover what he calls you to do. Not ultimately as in, what am I going to be doing in 10 years, but what am I called to do this week? Who can I walk across the room to have a conversation with or to pray with? This is the means by which other people come to faith in Jesus. Not just by what we say, but by who we are and the way that we live and act. This is how people get to know him. So there we go. Who is wise and understanding among you? I think we can say we'll give it a shot, Jesus, to be those kinds of people. As we meet Jesus, we get wisdom. As we do that, we are serving in humility, finding the deeds that he's calling us to do, and showing the Christian faith in the way that we are and the way that we act.